Do you see? This will need more and more outside. Money, clothes, cars, right place to live, status symbols. It's just, it's like the alcoholics say, you need more and more of what doesn't work. And you can see, remember I said you dance faster and faster over there. You just, a more elaborate vacation, a bigger house, a fancier car. You can just see every 5 years in America, sophistication just goes higher and higher. I need this to be happy, and then I need that to be happy. And once you reach that level, you can never go back. Whereas the saints, they need less and less to make them happy. It's really that simple. Their contentment is from within. They're not expecting the future to be any different than it is right now. Because how you do the now we're going to tie into contemplative practice. How you do anything is how you do everything. And if you're accessing the now, God, being, consciousness, what is, use whatever word you're comfortable with, it doesn't really matter. If you're accessing that right now, then you're going to have found the well springs of joy right now. And then you'll carry that into the future too. If not, I can tell you, you can be on a beach in Hawaii, all right? Picture your perfect beach, all right? And I'll promise you, when you're there, your mind is going to be doing the same things on that beach that it's doing right now. Judging, if that's what you're doing, critiquing, negating, because that's who you are. And you've all been there. I mean, I've been there. Haven't you been on the perfect vacation that you look forward to for weeks? And you get there and say, I'm really not happy. I'm not supposed to be happy. This is all because you're still upset, you're still angry, you're still fearful, whatever you are. So contemplation is saying, change it right here, or don't expect the future to be any different than the now. It isn't. Nothing's going to change. And if you can't believe that God is here right now, when you go to Mass or church tomorrow, God isn't going to be there either. Because you won't know how to access that moment any differently. So I always say that presence, and that's the key word. Presence is a relational term. And you can offer people the real presence in the Eucharist, perhaps. But if you don't know how to be present to presence, there is no presence. Now, what we're doing in contemplation, you're learning how to be present. That's really it. You're learning how to access what is. Now, the reason most people run from it is because you know what comes up first? The garbage. Remember when it says the Spirit drove Jesus into the wilderness. And it says there he met the wild beasts. This is Mark 1:13-15. The Spirit drove him into the wilderness. There he met the wild beasts. And angels ministered to him. I'm afraid first what comes up is the garbage. That's why most teachers insist on at least 20 minutes. Because you can assume that the first, sometimes my whole 20 minutes is just the garbage. But you can assume, certainly the first half of any sit is just letting go of those thoughts that want to impose themselves on you, those judgments, those fears, those negations, that discomfort, that unprocessed conversation at breakfast, whatever it might be, all of that just keeps attacking you and assaulting you. So what you have to do is you have to become the watcher, where you step back from it and you see that judgment. Now that might sound to you at first like that's an intellectual game. It isn't. Do you see what's happening there? Is you're separating from it and you're letting it be over there. So now you know that feeling is not me. I'm over here watching it over there, which means it isn't me. Most people never do that. The feeling has them all the time. They never separate from it. And that's what it means to be possessed by a demon. The feeling has them. They feel they've got to have it. No, I don't have to have it. So Thomas Keating teaches this beautiful and almost simple boat exercise where he says, you sit on the bank of a stream, you observe each of your thoughts coming along saying, think me, feeling, saying, feel me, feel me. Acknowledge you're having the feeling. Acknowledge that you're having the thought. Don't hate it. Don't judge it. Don't critique it. Don't in any way move against it. But simply name it. Resentment toward so-and-so. Thought about so-and-so. Admit that you're having it. He says, place it on a boat and let it go down the river. The river is your stream of consciousness. Now that's what you're doing in the first stages of contemplation. This self can't do it because all it has is its own thoughts. Most people think they are their thinking. Right? Most people think they are their thinking. They don't have a clue who they are apart from their thoughts. What you're doing in contemplation is moving to a level beneath your thoughts, at the level of pure being, the level of really what we call pure consciousness, which is not consciousness of anything in particular. It's simply awareness. And now as soon as you think, I am doing this well, or I am aware, that's a boat. Or as soon as you think, oh, I'm doing this terribly, if he knew what I'm thinking about, this terrible thought I'm having, that's a boat too. Let go of that. That's the ego trying to judge itself. And it'll always do that. Trying to judge, and the only way the ego knows how to do anything is up or down. Either I'm better or I'm worse than. It's always up or down. Critiquing. Men tend to compete, women tend to compare. But it's the same ego game. Trying to see whether I'm up or whether I'm down. We just, in pure being, there's no up and down. There just is. There's no evaluation. It's just a delighting in a kind of spaciousness, a kind of freedom. Now those thoughts that come back for round 2 and round 3 and sometimes round 4 and 5, those are your compulsive patterns of thinking. Some of you are going to see that you have paranoid patterns of fearing what might go wrong. Some of you are going to have attack patterns of wanting to blame, change, fix, make things right. That's the type I am. And then there's some of you who are going to be the codependent types who are always, how am I looking? How am I feeling? How does everybody relate to me and like me and so forth, you know? And they're all ego games. They really are. Because you're a value without any of those. But when you've played those mental games for many years, you really don't know how not to do it. So remember, I'm not saying attack it the way we used to do dirty thoughts. Remember, I had dirty thoughts. I just heard 2 hours of children's confessions this morning. You know, and it's all attack these bad things. No, I'm not telling you attack. I'm saying observe it. That's all. The observing is actually more effective than the attacking. Did you know that? To attack something actually engages it in a negative way. It's the attraction of forbidden fruit. The generations of teenage boys we condemn to you know, by attacking their so-called dirty thoughts, it only engaged them at a deeper level. No, you observe it and you see what you're doing. And you have to stand over here and see it and see that it's sort of useless. It's all a mental trip. But if you can't see that, you will be trapped by it. So that's early stage contemplation. Now, at that point, that doesn't sound very religious, does it? Here is my point. That if God wants to get at you, and my assumption is God does, if God wants to get at you, if God wants to get through your barriers and your blockages, at that point, God has the best chance of doing it. Quite simply because finally you're out of the way. With your ego, your judgments, your fears, your angers, your attachment to your own self-image. And it will have a lot to do with attachments. Attachments to feelings, attachments to thoughts, attachments to self-image. And you won't know how attached you are to those things normally until they're taken from you. That's why the mystics and saints talk so much about the necessity of suffering. That when things are taken from you, let's say just your dignity is taken from you. One of the interns spoke to you this morning. And so you walk down the street chafing, just chafing. Why don't they like me? And I knew they all think they're better than I. And the mind just goes on, and that's all your false self. trying to protect yourself. But you'll actually be able to thank God for that when you recognize that you would never have seen how much your false self is in control today if not for that humiliation. So basically, and I got this from Thomas Keating, although I totally believe it, he says he now charts the path of conversion as a series of necessary humiliations to the false self. It's that simple. That's what conversion is. A series of necessary humiliations to the false self. Now I know why my Father Francis and so many of the saints prayed for humiliations. Because you will live here until this thing is humiliated, is taken from you. And then you'll see it for the silliness it is. So like when I take offense or I'm upset, I try to ask myself anymore, Richard, what part of you is upset now? What part of you is humiliated? What part of you is angry? What part of you wants to get him back? And it is never my true self. Seeing in you. Notice, for example, the very final prepositions of the great Eucharistic prayer. Through him, with him, in him. Great stuff. It recognizes that this isn't anything I can generate or concoct or engineer by myself. It is done to me. Not I, but the wind that blows through me. It is being done to me. And all you can do is get out of the way. Now that's what you're doing at your 20-minute sit. You're getting out of the way. And the main thing you got to get out of the way is your mind. It took me years to recognize that. At first to people it seems like an overstatement, like putting too much blame on the mind. But in fact, it is the mind that keeps defining the self, engineering and manufacturing futures, and worrying about past mistakes, replaying past wounds and so forth, over and over again. We now think that 90% of human thought, although some say 96%, I don't know, that matters a great deal, is repetitive and useless. It just keeps thinking the same things over and over again. That's something. And by the time you're my age, it's even worse, because you've got 2 or 3 neural grooves that you've grown used to, and you just replay every event through those same 3 responses. That's why a lot of old people, frankly, I mean, I love old people, but if they haven't done their inner work, most old people are not much fun to be around. And you know that. Because they've got 4 staid responses. And those are the same responses to everything. What you see in the contemplative mind is a freshness of response, an originality of response, an originality of seeing. So contemplation, let's just draw it together on this, is meeting reality in its most simple and immediate form. Now, to meet reality in its most simple and immediate form, the only way you can do that is you've got to get rid of your mental grids, your mental ways of judging, critiquing, computing, everything. Thinking. So isn't it funny that, Descartes probably is the nadir of Western philosophy. And he says, the French philosopher, I think, therefore I am. And here we would come along now and say, it's precisely, I think, therefore I'm not. We'd say it's your thinking that keeps you in this. Huh? It's your non-thinking at the level of pure presence. And presence cannot be thought. Try it. I think this is part of the reason God called most people to loving sexual relationships. Because that's one place where you can't think it. You have to experience it. You have to be present to another person. You can't have sex with your head, to my knowledge. Some men try, I think, to mentally compute the whole thing. It won't work. You have to move to the level of simply being in communion with being. And I cannot process that through the head. If you don't have any training in giving up the head, I don't think you'll ever experience being. And it becomes a way of life. So I don't like to think of it so much as something you do as something you are. And so I often use the phrase the contemplative stance. It's a stance. It's a way of living and moving and walking and being in this world. Even though I fully admit that we don't live all our 24 hours there. I certainly don't. The world keeps pulling you back into the false self. Put on this hat. Put on this identity. Take on this hurt. Put on this self-importance. And we all do things. That is a hard place to live. You have to be taught how to live here. Because there's no positive or negative way you can dress yourself up. And we know now people would sooner think of themselves as sinners or bad or inferior. That gives them something to fight. Do you understand? Something to oppose, so, rather than to live in the emptiness. So that's the language. Buddhists use emptiness. Franciscans, we use the word poverty. Carmelites use the word nothingness. The New Testament Jesus word is the desert. It's all about going to a place that at first feels like no thing. Nothing. There's nothing. This is why it's so hard to sell. It's so hard for me to talk about it even here. It's unprovable. It's unmeasurable. It's unpredictable. It's just pure being. And if you can't live at that level of pure being, if you constantly need a product or a performance or some kind of test, you won't know how to live there. That is the language of the mystics. I just gave you the key. You can open up any mystic now, and they'll make sense to you. That's the way they're talking all the time. And if you're living at the level of capitalist consumerism, where everything is product and achievement and performance, and who am I, and what shingle can I hang, on my forehead, or what name can I give myself, you won't know how to go there. So all great spirituality, certainly contemplative spirituality, is about letting go. Letting go of what you don't need. Don't need this, don't need that. And in that, normally, you collapse back into this. And it only needs to happen once. Once you know this, you'll never be satisfied with anything less. This is what you were created for, because this is who you are. And you found it then. And you don't spend the rest of your life thinking that your life is out in front of you. That it's going to happen 10 years from now. When we get all the bills paid and when my husband starts doing this or that, no. It might as well happen right now. Right now. And then the future, ironically, will be different. Because you're going to bring a different self, a transformed self, a contemplative self to those new situations. So you'll find that it really is, I believe, the most radical thing you can teach is contemplation. The most radical thing. And it's therefore the thing that a lot of people will deem the most useless, because it appears to be so harmless at first, just a little pious way of praying. But no, it's not a way of praying, it's a way of being in the world that is absolutely different. Absolutely different. It's a way of walking in the world, seeing the world that is absolutely different.